You are listening to the Horse Radio Network, part of the Equine Network family.
What a beautiful day for horses in the morning.
You are listening to the #1 horse podcast in the world. Here is your entertaining look at the horse world and the people in it.
I'm Coach Jen from Ocala, Florida.
And I'm Mary Kitzmiller from Kemp, Texas, and you're listening to Horses in the Morning on the Horse Radio Network for October 3rd. It is episode 3533. Good morning, Horse World.
What is your favorite day of the week?
You never stop learning. You never stop understanding. It's more in depth than just riding a horse. Exciting, knowing that for the rest of my life I could work on this and I'll never stop learning.
Welcome back, Mary Kitzmiller.
Thanks for having me back.
Woohoo! Hopefully, weather drama is behind all of us. It's going to be calm and quiet from here on out this year.
Yes. How did you guys fare? Is everything okay?
Everything is okay. We are about 35 miles inland from the west coast of Florida, and we were far enough inland that we did not get the severe winds or the tidal surge out along the coast. It just washed everything away. And it was the tidal surge more so than the rain and the wind. The ocean just came in and sucked everything out.
Wow.
So there are plenty of folks along the western coast of Florida who are in a world of hurt, and we're crossing our fingers and thinking of all those folks who need to get their lives back in order again. But here at over 2 acres in little itty bitty Morriston, Florida, we fared just fine. We had a couple of trees down, and that was it. Yeah.
Well, good. Yeah. I cannot believe how huge that thing was. That it's unimaginable. It's crazy. Well, I'm glad you guys made it through.
We made it through okay, and we're back in business. We finally got into our little house here at over 2 acres, and this is the first podcast I'm recording from using my regular studio equipment, and I kind of forget how to use it. It's been two months that I've been using all the portable stuff. It's like, wow, I have a lot more buttons than I usually do. Well, coming up on today's show, if you're new to this spot during the month, Mary and I get together once a month and we chat about all things horse training and a little bit of people training too. And a lot of it is inspired by questions that are submitted by listeners. And if you want to submit a question to Mary for us to chat about on the show, you have to be an auditor. And in order to be an auditor, you need to hop on over to Horse Radio Network, click on the Horses in the Morning button. And right there on the page, it'll tell you how you can become an auditor and get auditors only perks and be able to submit questions to Mary and other hosts when we do Q&As on the show. And right about now, every month, we do Mary's trainer tip. And her trainer tip is always inspired by something that piques my interest. What is it this time?
So I didn't have something off the top of my head this morning until I was looking through our auditor questions, and I thought, oh, this would be a good training tip. So the question that inspired it comes from Amanda, one of our HRN auditors. And her question is, how to teach a horse to move off your leg. My mare can move her hind end fairly well. Front end on one side is okay. The other is meh, but we are working on it. And moving the whole body off the leg is a no. She doesn't seem to understand what I'm asking. So that made me think about the way that I teach the side pass, which to me is like, it's pretty easy and I don't think about it. I just do it. And then I often realize that, oh, people don't know this little trick that I know to make it pretty easy and simple for your horse to understand. So I thought that would be my training tip.
Tell me, please.
Okay, so if you think about getting the horse, whether it's a side pass or a half pass or kind of a leg yield to move its whole body over, if you break that down into simpler pieces, it becomes much easier to understand. Horses often will lean into pressure naturally. So, like leg pressure, oftentimes you'll try to put that leg on and get your horse to move over, and they'll lean against it. And it can be kind of difficult to get them to switch gears and understand that they ought to move away from it. So I like to break it down. And I actually teach this on the ground first, but you can also teach it from their back. So if I want them to move their whole body over, if I break the horse into parts and think about moving their shoulders, moving their hind end, moving their rib cage, and work each of those parts individually, then it becomes much easier to get them to move their whole body. So Amanda mentions that she can move her hind end fairly well. So that's one part of the equation. I want to teach my horse to be able to yield their hindquarters off of leg pressure. And that's usually one of the easier things to teach as far as leg cues go, because I will use a little bit of leverage with my inside rein to get that horse to move its hind end away. So what I mean by that is if I'm sitting on my horse and I want their hind end to move to the right, I will tip their nose to the left. And if I take the horse's nose to the left enough, the horse will start thinking about, oh, I don't really like having my nose bent this way. I want to straighten my body out. And so they'll naturally tend to move their hindquarters away. So move their hindquarters to the right in order to straighten their head and neck back out. So I just use that. So I tip their nose to the left. I'll put my leg back toward the girth, I'll put my left leg back toward the horse's hind end. And once the horse moves a step over, I release the rein and I release the leg. So I'll do that on each side. So get those hindquarters nice and loosened up. The front end can be a little bit trickier. I like to teach their front end to move away from my leg as the horse is already moving. So, and I do this with little baby colts that have but just a few rides. So I keep it pretty simple. As the horse is walking around, I tip their nose in the direction that I want to go, and I'll add the leg. The leg is just kind of a support cue. And when the horse's feet follow the nose, so if they tip their nose to the right, I wait for their nose to go, then their head and neck, followed by their shoulder, followed by their feet. And when
now let me ask a quick important question here.
Yes.
Because I spend a lot more time teaching humans than teaching horses in my horse life. When with your leg aids, yielding or moving hindquarters versus moving shoulders, is your leg position different when you give the cue? If you want to move the horse's quarters to the right, is your leg in a different position than if you wanted to move their shoulders to the right?
Yes. And in the beginning, I exaggerate it pretty heavily. So think of the horses, there's, where you're going to put their leg, their barrel having like 3 different buttons. So for me, if I want the whole horse's shoulder to move in a certain direction, if I want the horse's shoulder to move to the right, I'm going to use my left leg and I'm going to use it up by my girth. If I want them to move the hind end, I'll move my leg back, getting close to the flank area. So in the beginning, I'll have those 3 buttons. And of course, the rib cage, or like my side pass cue, is going to be right in the middle, right at the horse's rib cage. So in the beginning, those 3 buttons will be very far apart so that the horse can really differentiate between the leg cues. And then as the horse becomes more advanced, my leg is not going to move very much at all, but I'll still move it into those 3 different spots to get those different body parts to move. So like if you look at advanced dressage, that leg's not swinging around too terribly much. But in the beginning, you really want to exaggerate it to help the horse figure it out.
There you go. So once you've got all 3 sections moving away from your leg individually, how do you start to combine that?
So once I have the front end and the hind end to where that horse will loosen up the forequarters and they'll loosen up the hindquarters, then I'll start working on that middle button, which is going to be my side pass button. So what I like to do is I like to use the fence to start, because most horses, when you try to get them to move their whole body over, will want to go forward. So it can be a little awkward if you're trying to move them over, but then they want to go forward. So then you try to hold them with your reins, and then you guys kind of get all up in a bind. So I'm going to use the fence to stop the forward motion, so we don't even have to worry about it. So how I do this is I will walk the horse down the rail, and on a pretty loose rein. I'm not trying to collect them or get them on the bit or anything at this point. I just want them to go nice and forward, relaxed on the rail. And let's say I'm going on the rail to the left. So my right shoulder's to the wall. So as I do this, what I will start to do is I'm going to move the hindquarters first. So my horse is walking along. I'm going to pick up my right rein, which is my outside rein, and tip the horse's nose to the wall. As I tip their nose to the wall, I'm going to take my right leg and move it back toward the flank. And what I'm going to ask my horse to do is to step the hind end toward the center of the arena. So we're going to be walking along the rail, and I'm going to ask my horse to move their hindquarters 90 degrees to the left. So by the time you finish this maneuver, your horse's nose is on the wall and you are perpendicular to the wall. Does that make sense?
That does, but that's happening in increments. You don't just the first time you walk down the wall say, we're going to go 90 degrees. I'm assuming then that you start out, you let your right leg come back, and you get your horse to move in one track, 3 feet off the edge. So he's doing that for a few steps, and then you release the pressure, start again, or do you do it all at once?
Yeah, if you do this correctly, you can get an easy 90-degree turn. The key for this is the horse should already be walking forward. If they have difficulty walking forward and relaxed, or maybe they're a little nervous about being on the wall, you need to work on that first. But if your horse's feet are already in motion and you use that outside rein, it should swing that hindquarters nice and easy in one motion, a 90-degree turn. And I do, to keep the horse from overcorrecting and doing like a 180-degree turn, I make sure that as soon as they get to that position I want them, I release that leg, release the rein. And then I'm going to let my horse sit there. I might have to like settle their feet and pet them on the neck, let them know they did good, and just let them sit there with their nose on the wall for a few moments. And that's really important, because I need to let my horse know you did it. You did the thing I asked. And we're going to take a break and think on that. And then we're going to do this again. So then I set him back on the direction I was going. I'm going down the wall, headed toward the left, counterclockwise around the ring. And then when the horse is going forward, nice and relaxed, I do that again. So remember, I've already been working on getting that horse to move its hind end. They should have an understanding on that already. So this is just the same thing, only we've got the wall to help us. And yes, and I will usually devote, and I like to do this at the end of my ride. It helps when the horse is relaxed, you've already warmed them up, they're not too antsy. And I like to make this a really peaceful, relaxed exercise. So as I'm cooling my horse down and walking them down the wall, every so often, I'll just tip their nose to the wall, yield the hindquarters. And I'll do it all the way around the arena one way. So just walk forward a little bit, hindquarters. Take a break, walk forward a little bit, hindquarters. Take a break. And I do that until I've gone around my whole arena. And you can do that as many or as little times as you want, but I just take a lap.
Let's specify, how big is your arena?
Oh, that's a good question.
It is not 200 by 300.
No, but you could do this on a 200. I've done it on one that big. Yeah, no, it's not quite that big. It's like 175 by something.
So keep in mind, the harder this is for your horse to grasp, the smaller increments you may have to develop it in. If it's a genuine struggle for that horse to step across himself, and you've really been struggling with it for a long time, you may find that when you first start doing it just the length of the arena the first day, oh, yay us. Because again, we have to be empathetic to not how hard is it for us? How hard is it for the horse? And some horses go, oh, once they understand the exercise, the light bulb goes on, ding, 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 they can do it. Other horses, it's partly the light bulb wasn't coming on. They didn't understand, but it's also partly because it's genuinely difficult for them physically. And that's something I wanted to touch on with this one is make sure that you're not dealing with a subtle issue with the horse's spinal alignment, because especially with horses that can cross over comfortably on one side and very uncomfortably the other side, because the side pass, the horse has to cross his legs over. If he's very one-sided in that regard, you might want to investigate that and make sure that you've got the spine aligned where you want it. And also, and this is, I see this more with English riders than Western riders. A lot of English riders tend to just push harder. They just make the aids bigger and bigger and bigger. And when you do that, your body becomes tighter and stiffer and tighter and stiffer. When you're asking the horse to stay soft so he can cross over, if you're getting stiff and tight, you're literally blocking the horse's ability to move. So take a quick check and make sure that you're not inadvertently tightening up on the horse and blocking movement. It's amazing how some horses who seem to be just regular Joes, they're not overly sensitive, they're not real dead, they're just kind of right in the middle. Under certain circumstances, for example, lateral work, even the tiniest little blockage caused by the rider's inappropriate balance or tension can just stop them in their tracks when it comes to lateral work. So those are two things you can investigate. And an easy way to test this, if you have the opportunity, is, like you said, do it from the ground. Ask your horse to do side passes as part of their groundwork exercises. If they nail it every time, then you have to look at the rider influence, or have a rider who is not even necessarily familiar with your horse, but is very adept at asking for this movement, to hop on that horse and ask for the movement and see if you get a similar result or a very, very different result. That's going to give you a bit of a gauge on where rider influence falls on this training problem. There you go.
That's a very good point. And I do want to point out, when you are ready to start this, so at this point, we've only moved the hindquarters, but this is the side passing exercise. This should be easy. This should be like a no-brainer. We're going to just I like to sneak the side pass on my horse to, like, one day we're just side passing. The horse is like, yeah, the horse is like, why am I going sideways? It should be like that. If there is any resistance, you need to evaluate what's going on. So this, like I said, I like to do this exercise at the end of my ride because I want this to be a casual, we're walking along on a loose rein and, oh, there goes your hindquarters. It should be like that. If it's not, then that tells me I need to, like you said, evaluate, how am I sitting on my horse? Am I asking with too much pressure? Am I getting my horse in a bind? Most horses should be able to do this with ease. This particular part of the exercise should not be too physically demanding. So if something's going wrong, we need to evaluate. Sometimes it means, oh, you know what? I didn't really have good control of my horse's hindquarters. So if I find resistance in my horse, the best thing to do is to take them off of that wall, because if they're being stiff and resistance and they're smashed up against a wall, they're going to get upset. So I take them away from the wall and I work on the hindquarters out in the middle, or I go back to the ground and I teach them how to yield the hindquarters on the ground. So if any point you're hitting resistance, you need to backtrack or maybe reevaluate how you're asking. So I usually can get this exercise done in one day to where the horse is like, yep, got it. So again, whether you take a whole lap, half lap around the arena, whether you ask 100 times around the arena, or maybe only 3 or 4, a more nervous horse, I might walk a long way away. I might walk them 50 feet and then ask, just to keep it, again, we're trying to keep it relaxed and almost like an afterthought, like, hey, we're almost done with the ride. And hey, can you just step your hindquarters over? Brilliant. Perfect. Okay.
Yeah, I like that. And it gives the horse the opportunity to reestablish momentum in that forward walk, because if you're not walking forward, and walking forward is as much a mental thing as a physical thing for the horse, this is all not going to work out as well. I like that. Yeah.
Yeah. And the forward relaxed is what gets this to work easily. It's very hard for a horse to go from a complete standstill to a more advanced lateral move. That's difficult. So I like to do this from nice forward walk. So that is that is step one. Now, we're going to go right into that side pass. Now, I haven't mentioned the forequarters, but it is also important that you've worked on getting the shoulder to step away from your leg individually off the rail. But anyway, so then what I do, so I usually spend one lesson dedicated to that. Like, that's all we're going to do. Walk down the rail, move those hindquarters. The next stride, if those hindquarters feel nice and loose and everything's going right there, I can start asking for my very first side pass step. So again, I'm using that forward momentum. The way this works is those horses' feet need to just remain in motion. So here's where it can get a little tricky. So I'm walking my horse down the rail. I tip his nose to the outside. So I tip his nose to the wall. As he begins to step the hindquarters over, my leg is going back toward the flank area, not in the flank, but, toward the hind end to ask for the hindquarter yield. Now, before he stops his feet, I'm going to then bring my leg up at his rib cage. So smack in the middle of his rib cage. And I'm going to use my reins to keep his nose on the rail and see if I can just gently push his whole body over one step. So if I do this, if I yield my horse's hindquarters to the middle, or if I yield my horse's hindquarters 90 degrees and he comes to a stop and then I try to side pass, that's not going to work. This needs to be one clean sweep. So as he's yielding his hindquarters to that 90-degree turn, bring your leg to the middle and use your reins to kind of help balance the horse and see if you can just get one step over. Sometimes I don't even get a step. Sometimes I get a lean and I'll release there. So the first time you start to get the side pass, you're just looking for anything that kind of feels like a side pass, and then you release. And then the important thing is release those reins, release your leg aids, let the horse stand, let him think. This is where he's learning it, is when we just sit and think for a minute. That might be, I might sit for 20 seconds. I might sit for an entire minute, but I just let the horse just think about what just happened. And then I walk him down the rail again, and I do it again. So it's also important to note with this exercise, I'm usually doing this on pretty green horses, but in terms of my rein aids, I'm using one rein or the other. I'm not really picking up and putting pressure on both reins at the same time. So what I mean by that is when I'm doing the hindquarter yield, I'm using my outside rein. I'm not doing anything with my inside rein. When I go from hindquarter yield to side pass, I will use both my reins, but they're kind of one then the other. And what I mean by that is when you first try to get those few side passes, your horse may try to turn to the left and go to walking back down the rail. So I'll block him with my right rein and say, no, don't walk forward, stay sideways. So you're just kind of using those reins to kind of lightly box the horse in and keep his nose on the rail. And he might kind of shift his weight a little awkwardly for a moment, trying to figure out where the answer is. And then hopefully he takes a step into the side pass. As soon as he does that, the important thing here is you got to release everything as soon as he figures it out. Again, if I want to not have this be full of resistance and tenseness, so I'm just looking for any kind of inkling of the side pass. Does that make sense?
It all makes perfect sense. So for a horse that has, I'm going to use my air quotes, been taught to side pass, but it didn't go well. A horse that when he's asked to side pass gets resistant, chews on the bit, tosses the head, threatens to go backwards, even worse, threatens to rear. Are there some, how far back in that process would you go to try and reteach? All the way to the beginning?
Typically, yes. I'll just say, you know what, this ain't working. And I pretend the horse has never side passed a day in his life. And I'll go all the way back to the beginning, maybe all the way back to my groundwork, and break apart each individual part of that horse and get him to yield off of it. If he doesn't have issues with the basic steps, then I can move forward quickly. But if I find those holes, then I'm like, aha, okay, that's where it is. And it's funny because to me, the side pass is like an afterthought to teach now because I keep it really easy, really simple. It feels like the easiest thing in the world. But, way back in the day when I was a young, arrogant trainer who tried to kind of really push my horses into things because I was green. I didn't really know what I was doing. I did have issues of the horse grabbing hold of the bit and leaning into my leg. I even had a few horses that reared up teaching the side pass. And initially I thought, man, this horse is real difficult. This horse just really isn't getting it. And they're being disrespectful. But as I got more educated, magically, none of my horses did that anymore. So, what was the common denominator? Once I figured stuff out. So if you're hitting that resistance, that should not be happening. That should not be part of teaching your horse the side pass. This should be easy. So as with anything I teach, if it's falling apart, it's not working, we're not progressing, we need to break it down. And then if that doesn't work, then we need to break it down more. And then if that doesn't work, then we need to break it down even more. So even with the horse that maybe has a history with side passing, a negative history with side passing, we're going to unpoison that side pass for the horse by just pretending, wipe the slate clean. You don't know how to side pass. We've never done it before. And if you keep it mellow and low and easy and start with the simplest of exercises, you can start to break down that horse's resistance to the side pass.
There we go. That's very interesting. And it's very easy to ask for too much because especially if you spend a lot of time in a competitive atmosphere with a trainer, that you're always encouraged to push yourself, to push your horse. That's, after all, the crux of competition, isn't it? It's very easy to inadvertently ask for a little too much, then you end up backtracking, versus only ask for so little that it's dead obvious it's going to work. And do that 3 times before you go, yep, I think we can start pushing. We start at a little bit, we start on the 3rd rung of the ladder instead of the 1st.
Yeah. And, I would say this is the heart of like most every horse problem there is, horse training problem, is we tend to think of maneuvers or tasks for our horse as one thing, when really, especially those advanced maneuvers, and to me, I consider a lot of stuff advanced that other people wouldn't. To me, being able to lope for 5 minutes without stopping can be pretty advanced for our horse. Doing a lead departure from a walk is advanced. A side pass is advanced. I learned starting colts that they don't know these things. And if something's going wrong, it's very rarely, if ever, the horse, he has an attitude problem, he's being disrespectful. It's like, no, this is like I took a kindergartner on his first day of school. He's bright, he's young, he's ready to learn. And I sat him down and I said, okay, I need a 20-page research paper on campaign finance reform and do it in MLA format, single space, Times New Roman, cite your sources, blah, 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 blah. And, obviously, and then he doesn't know how to do it. And then I punish him for it. Do you think that kid's going to want to learn? He's going to be completely confused and immediately start bawling. So think about that, but with your horse. So if I'm hitting resistance, and this is also why I very rarely get angry when I ride anymore. In the moments when I do find frustration and anger, I definitely know it's not the horse. Don't take it out on the horse. I need to take a breather and think about this for a moment, because, we're taking this 1,000-pound prey animal and we're saying, I want you to do some fancy prancing for me while I wear my best outfit. They don't understand what the deal is with that. But, so Yeah, if you're hitting resistance, you're hitting the rearing up, the kicking out, whatever, barring any kind of physical ailment, the answer is I got to break it down, make it simpler.
Make it simpler. There we go. And sometimes it's better, for example, a lot of times when we're talking about these training questions, Mary, I haven't the first clue how to train X, Y, or Z because I've never done that. And I sometimes feel like I'm at an advantage because I don't ever think of the exercise as its complete unit because I don't know that much about it.
Yeah, that's a good way to look at it.
Sometimes chatting over it with somebody who has a different perspective or different level of knowledge can be really, really handy. And speaking of different levels of knowledge, we're going to have a chat just now with Samuel Dendanto, who is the inventor, the big brain behind our sponsor here on the Mary Kitzmiller training episode, Equine Balanced Support. And they make these little things called Nutri Grazers, which are the world's best yummy horse treat that are also healthy. So let's have a little chat with him and find out why he makes them and who is the winner of the bag of Nutri Grazers. Well, welcome to the show, Sam.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for having me. My name is Sam with Equine Balanced Support.
Yay! Equine Balanced Support, in case you haven't noticed, has been the sponsor of Mary Kitzmiller's monthly training episode for a little while now. And we are so thrilled that you stepped up to do that. And it kind of fits really well because both Mary and I appreciate using positive reinforcement training, which frequently includes treats. We call them treats. They're food rewards for our horses. But I wanted to have Sam on to chat today, not just because we needed to pick the winner of the Nutri Grazers Big Bag O Treats, but also I wanted to find out a little bit about why Equine Balanced Support decided they needed to make horse treats that were actually good for a horse. Why? It's a cookie.
Yeah, so we've been building balanced forage-based diets for horses since about 2006. My business partner and our late founder have been interested in doing this even before that and trying to use science and understanding bioavailability of nutrients to create diets for their horses. So they started to leverage this information and try and get it to other people. And then we saw the huge rise in the last 10 years of metabolic disorders in horses. And we know that people love to give treats. So we found that if we could help people give a healthier treat, and we think like a perfect or a kind bar for humans, something that's a little more species appropriate, that they would be able to still give treats as much as they felt that they wanted to without having the risk of giving them like high sugar treats.
Along with, talking about the rise in the metabolic issues, there's also been a different kind of rise in the horse training world of people who are learning the benefits of positive reinforcement training, which is something that I've been studying as well. And even though I don't currently have a horse with metabolic issues, I'm feeding treats in high enough volume that even though my horse doesn't have an underlying health condition, I don't want to be giving him tons of these really sweet, kind of molasses-y treats. And so it's been actually kind of challenging for me to find something that is palatable, that my horse really wants to work for, but that is safe. I don't worry about overdoing it with him.
Yes, absolutely. Especially, we've always been using like food-based rewards for dogs, and I think it's becoming more common in the horse world, and making sure that we're giving them something that, like you're saying, if we're giving them hand over fist of treats, that we don't want to be giving them something that's going to spike their sugar and have long-term issues.
Yeah, that's true. And again, Glenn and I also give cookies to our horses. Sometimes we just like to toss them in the bucket and watch them eat them. Sorry, it makes me feel good. Something I've noticed in a trend, especially with companies, ginormous companies, that the horse treat is just one teensy weensy little cog in their ginormous wheel. Their big sales point is the low sugar or low carbohydrate horse treat. That's everybody's buzzword right now. But then when you turn the bag over and you read the fine print, the ingredients, my personal opinion, are garbage.
Yeah, so we tried to choose things that were not only the low sugar and low carbohydrates and species appropriate, but actually had some small amount of nutritional value in them. Like we have kelp and we have probiotics and electrolytes. It's not a ton, it's not a supplement, but it's just enough to kind of get you in that direction of thinking about how you can feed your horse in a more species appropriate, balanced manner.
It is. And as I said, Sam's been sponsoring Mary's show here for the past few months, and we are thrilled. And we did a little contest last month where folks could sign up to get themselves a free bag of Nutri Grazers yummy horse treats that are also very good for them. And what we're going to do this time is we're going to have Mary pick a number between 1 and what, Sam?
I think we ended up cutting it off right at, I believe it was 54, because we said 50 and then I didn't close it right in time. So I just wanted to give those people the opportunity.
Oh, you're a soft touch, Sam. So Mary, pick a number between 1 and 54.
I am always drawn to the number 37.
And who is number 37?
We have Summer Flynn from Columbus, Georgia. And so we'll get those out in the mail to you, and hope you enjoy your free bag of treats.
Well, thank you again, Sam, for stopping by with us and for sponsoring Mary's show.
Absolutely. I love what you guys are doing and hope we can continue to work together.
So speaking of Nutri Grazers yummy horse treats, we have a clicker training question this time, don't we?
Yes, I love clicker training questions. So we've got one, and this harkens back to our side passing and getting things to be broken down for our horse. So this is from our auditor, Taylor, and it is how to lunge a horse and use clicker training. She says, I cannot figure out how to reward for walk, trot, and canter because I have to stop her for the click and treat. She knows it pretty well already, but I'm trying to refine. And every time I click, she stops and comes to me. So really interesting conundrum with the clicker training. So if you're not familiar with the clicker training, when my horse, if I'm clicker training a maneuver for my horse or just using it during our regular training, I will click the horse to say, yes, you did very good. And I follow that with a food reward. Now, everyone has different styles when they do this. But for me, when I click that horse, that means stop immediately, go into treat receiving mode. So we're no longer in training mode. We are stopping and we're waiting for me to get the treat out of my pocket and give it to the. And this is important to me both for safety reasons. I do not want a horse that is continuing to trot around while I'm trying to give them a treat and they're coming at me with their teeth and their mouth open and we're trotting and da 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 da. So it's a safety thing. That horse should stop. Stop everything you're doing. Wait for the treat patiently, calmly, respectfully. The other reason I want my horse to stop when they hear a click is to make sure they understand what the click means or that the horse isn't in a state of fear and nervousness. I've noticed when I transition to more advanced exercises, if I'm clicking and my horse is not wanting to stop to go into treat receiving mode, it can often be because they're too nervous. So that tells me I need to backtrack and make it simpler again. But if I'm teaching my horse to lunge, I want them to walk, trot around in a circle, and I want to click them for good moments, but they stop every time I click. How am I ever going to get my horse to lunge? Well, like our side passing, if I'm using the clicker to teach my horse to lunge, I'm breaking it down into very simple things. So I have different phases of clicker training. When I'm teaching something new, I am in that high rate of reinforcement phase, meaning I'm doing lots of clicking and treating. So for me, when I break down lunging for my horse using clicker training, I have several different maneuvers I'm teaching. I like to teach my horse to back to the end of the lead rope, and that's a click and treat exercise. Then I like to teach my horse to move their shoulders toward the direction of the circle that they're going to go on. So that's a separate click and treat exercise. Then I teach my horse to go forward when I cue them. That's a separate click and treat exercise. Then I teach my horse to come to a stop when I ask by yielding their hindquarters. So that's a separate click and treat exercise. So when I'm in that phase, this high rate of reinforcement, and I'm doing lots of clicking of these individual little pieces of the puzzle, it doesn't look like lunging. It looks like back a couple of steps, click, treat, shoulders, couple of steps, click, treat, go forward, click, treat, stop, click, treat, da 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 da. Because I'm in that teaching mode. My horse doesn't know how to go forward and around in a circle yet. So how do I get from that point of stop, go, stop, go, stop, go to what I want to teach my horse, which is to lunge? Because the whole point of this exercise is to exercise my horse, to train my horse. So then I'm going to start changing my schedule of reinforcement. So this can mean lots of different things. Maybe I will click not for each individual thing my horse does. Maybe I'll start chaining those behaviors together. For instance, earlier I said I teach my horse to back up, click, treat, move your shoulders, click, treat, go forward, click, treat, stop, click, treat. Maybe this time I'll do back up, then move your shoulder, click, treat, and do that over and over again. And then I'll say, okay, now back up, move your shoulder, go forward 3 steps, click, treat. Now back up, move your shoulder, go forward 10 steps, click, treat. Back up, move your shoulder, go forward a half a circle, click, treat. Now a whole circle, now 3 circles, now 20 circles, click, treat. So do you see how by adding more and more links to that chain, my clicks and treats become less and less? And this is how you advance in clicker training. Ideally, I should be able to take this to the degree where my horse can lunge for 20 or 30 minutes for one clicker treat or no clicker treats. There comes a point in this where the behavior comes learned and it's expected of my horse. And if I've done this well, and I've made this very clear, the behavior can actually become rewarding in and of itself because the horse has related it to this very strong history of reinforcement. Like, man, I've gotten so many cookies for this. I just love lunging because I just evokes warm, fuzzy feelings. So that is, yeah.
Well, you know, it's a little bit like if a lot of us, you have a favorite self-care thing you do. You get a pedicure or you go to your favorite hairdresser or you go to a massage. Initially, it's probably a case of you do that because you have a physical reward for it. But after a while, you've done it enough times, just thinking about it. Oh, yeah, I want to go do that. It's always so nice. Yeah, I get that.
Exactly. And, you know, I will still use that click and treat often with my horse, my advanced horses. But after a while, it becomes less of a, oh, the behavior is dependent on this and more of a, man, you did a really good job with that. Thank you. It's just a polite thank you. But if the next day I didn't click and treat, they would still do it. So that's the goal with this. A lot of people get stuck in the very basic clicker training phase, which is that high rate of reinforcement. And that's the part that often gets criticized because they're like, I just saw a video about this yesterday. They're like, my horse does Liberty because he loves me, not because I'm going to give him a cookie. And I'm like, no, he does Liberty because if he doesn't, you work him harder. Nothing wrong with making the right thing easy and the wrong thing difficult. But, you know, let's not pretend that your horse woke up and is like, I just want to go do Liberty circles all day. Some love it, but, you know, and they can all learn to enjoy their work no matter how you train. But, you know, with the clicker training, you want to work toward varying your rate of reinforcement and clicking less and less and less as your horse learns more and more and more. So the one way to do it, I explained, was by chaining the behaviors together, by making the horse do 2 things in a row, now 3 things in a row. The other way you can do it is vary the times you click. So let's say I'm working on side passing with my horse. And up till now, every time my horse does side passing steps, I click and they get a reward. Well, after a while, I can say, you know what? Let's only click and reward every 3rd time you side pass. So we do 1 side pass, I'll release pressure, but no click and treat. 2 side passes, release pressure, but no click and treat. 3 side passes, click and treat and release pressure at the same time. And I'll make that the pattern if we'll do it every 3rd one. Now, you would think that your horse would start to go, oh, I'm not getting the food as much, so I'm not going to do it as well. If you've done this right, you actually build more desire to do it, which is very, very interesting. It's a really cool phenomenon. So that is a fixed schedule of I'm doing it every 3rd time. So like if you're lunging your horse, I'm going to click every 3rd canter departure, say. So you could do it that way.
I'm going to insert something in here. Horses will learn to count if you're too consistent. Nigel has learned to count because when I lunge him to keep me from going brain crazy, I will I'll go out there and we'll go out at the end of the line. Okay, we're going to trot 5 circles and then we'll do a transition to a walk. We'll walk 3 and then we'll trot 5. And 2 days in a row, I used the same numbers. I think it was 5 and 5, 2 days in a row. By the end of the second day, he would get to circle number 5 and do the transition. And the circles did not start in the same point in the circle. I always varied that part, but the number of circles stayed the same and he figured it out. Don't be a little bit random.
No, I use it. And I can explain about that in a little bit, but that is a great phenomenon that you can actually use in your horse training to your advantage. So that version of reinforcement is a very fixed schedule. Like I'm going to do every other one or every third one. And then you can make it every 5th one, every 10th one. You got to do 10 circles before you're going to hear a click treat. So that's how you can start getting that behavior to advance and not be dependent on click treats. The other way you can change your schedule of reinforcement is by doing it totally random. And this can really get your horse eager. So this is going to create a slot machine effect. So if I go to Vegas and I'm going to go play the slot machine, and every time I pull the handle, they don't use really handles anymore, but every time I pull the handle, so to speak, do I get the jackpot? Do I win the big prize?
No, you do
I do not.
No.
I do not. But what keeps my butt in that seat? Because one time last year, I did win the big jackpot, or just 20 minutes ago, I won $5. And so it creates my gambling addiction because I don't know when it could happen, but I know that it has happened in the past. So if I just stay here and do it 20 more times or 50 more times, or I do it for the rest of the day, I might hit that jackpot. So by varying your rate of reinforcement to just making it totally random, not only are you lessening the amount of times you have to click and treat, but you build more eagerness in your horse to do it because he's like, I never know when it's going to hit. So I just got to keep trying.
I got to be ready.
Yes. Yeah. You create a little gambling addict. So that's how you start to phase the click and treat out. And you go from behaviors which are just combination of several little bitty things that you're click and treating to one whole thing. Because lunging to me is a combination of thousands of different behaviors in your horse. I will mention one more thing in this question. She says the horse stops and comes to me. For me personally, I do not want the horse stopping and coming to me for the treat. My rule is you stop in place and you wait for me to bring it to you. This is another safety thing that helps build boundaries with my horse. I don't want my horse coming into my space when they hear the click. I will invite the horse into my space when I give them a cue that means come here. But in my opinion, if that horse comes to you every time for a treat, you're kind of encouraging him to push on your bubble a little bit and come get it from you. The rule for me is I bring it to you. And that helps curb any kind of overeager grabbing the treat from you, nuzzling in your treat bag. So even when I'm working a horse at liberty and they're 50, 100 feet away, and they do something I think is great, and I click, they will stop and wait for me to hoof it across the arena to give the treat to them, because those are the rules that we built. It also helps me to continue training, because if I was working my horse 100 feet away, like I was wanting him to lope down the rail or something, and I click and he runs to me to get the treat. Now, in order to do it again, I got to take my horse all the way back over there. Whereas if that click and treat means pause, I'm hitting the, freeze, I'm hitting that pause button. Then when I start the behavior up again, we're just right where we need to go. Instead of I clicked and now everything stops and the horse comes to me and now we got to set it all up again, if that makes sense.
That makes perfect sense. There we go. Interesting stuff. It's always interesting how using positive reinforcement training causes us to think in such a different way about the training and learning process. That's one of the things I enjoy about incorporating it into training with my horses is, again, different perspective versus straightforward pressure and release without any bridge marker, the clicker being the bridge marker. And then that in turn can help me use the pressure and release more effectively. The two really do complement each other.
It's worth looking into, even if you're like, you know what, I really don't want to use food and training. I don't want to be a quote unquote clicker trainer. I do several different ways of training my horse. I'm not just one kind of trainer, but learning more about the behavioral science and the steps in the clicker training has helped me become a better trainer overall, because when you're using when you're living in that positive reinforcement quadrant and you're trying to do it all with only positive reinforcement, it really forces you to break things down and make it easier for your horse to digest mentally. And then that helps me in any of my other traditional training methods. And like doing the chicken camp I did earlier in the year, where we're training poultry to do things. And all we have are, I can't like put a halter on a chicken and say, hey, chicken, I want you to run around some circles for me. It is not going to work. And chickens don't care to impress me, and they have a short attention span. And so I really had to like figure out, how do I get this chicken to do what I want? And even though it was a chicken and not a horse, it did help expand my understanding of horse training.
You can enjoy your favorite equine videos all in one place with Ride TV, the ultimate equine streaming platform. The newly relaunched Ride TV has all the series you love, like Rockstar Vets and Mini Horses, plus top-tier training videos and event footage from barrelracing.com and Horse and Rider on Demand. Whether you're ready to relax with your favorite series, binge watch competition footage, or train with a world champion, subscribe to Ride TV today for only $19.99 to see where your ride takes you. Visit ridetvgo.tv to subscribe.
Everybody's getting so good at really, really good questions. What's our next one?
Okay. Ooh, so this is from Vicky, and she says, if you make a horse take a pill against its will, does it experience learned helplessness? Thankfully, I found a pleasant way to administer it. So learned helplessness is this phenomenon, and it's been a while since I've read on it, so I'm probably going to get this wrong. In fact, I'm going to do a quick little Google so I can get this concept correct. I'm cheating at horse training by Googling. So it's a negative mental state in horses that can cause them to become unresponsive to pain, pressure, and cues. It can also make horses appear unmotivated, apathetic, and uninterested in most things. So this tends to happen, in my opinion and experience, not when you pop a pill in your horse's mouth. For 1 second of the day, they have to experience the unpleasantness of taking a pill. I don't think you're in danger of falling into having that happen to your horse. It's usually occurs when you do something repetitive and unyielding with their horse, where you give them no reward for doing the right thing and no release from doing the right thing. So your horse, in order to protect himself, just kind of goes into his little bubble and shuts down. And so, for instance, if I took a young colt that maybe is only used to standing tied for 5 and 10 minutes, and I just tied him to a tree and said, okay, I'll see you at dinner. If he doesn't like paw himself to China, by the end of the day or by the end of several days of doing this, he might just kind of go inside himself and say, there's nothing I can do. And that's when they enter that state of, no matter what I try, I don't find any release from this. I do believe it's important to teach your horse to tie for very long periods of time, but I like to do it over time and build on their mental stamina instead of just, I'm going to tie you up and let you figure it out. And you do that, the horse might do a lot of things to try to get out of it. They might paw, they might pull back, they might scream. And then after a while, they're just like, nothing works. And so some people might look at that and go, oh, look, he learned. It's like, no, he just shut down. He's on screensaver. So it's a way for them to protect themselves. So when you're giving your horse a pill, again, even if it didn't go well, even if my horse threw his head in the air and we fought a little bit and I shoved the pill down his throat and walked away, that's unpleasant and it's not ideal. We need to figure out a way to do that better. But once it's over and the horse has taken the pill, it's over. So I don't think you're in danger. You might be in danger of making your horse a little head shy or making him worse for the pill the next day, but I don't think you're going to fall into that realm of learned helplessness. Now, I may never get my horse to the point of, oh my gosh, it's pill time. I can't wait to take my pills. It may be it's like with dewormer. They're never just going to be like, oh, that dewormer tastes amazing. Even the apple flavored stuff. Now, my donkeys, for some reason, love dewormer. I don't have to
that's funny.
Yeah, I don't know what they're in maniacs. They're insane little dudes. I just stick the dewormer out and they chomp down on it, and I push the plunger, and I actually have to pull it out of their mouths, like let go. Donkeys are weird, but my horses never just love the dewormer. But what I can do to make it more pleasant is I can follow that dewormer once I've made sure that they've swallowed it with lots of their favorite treats. Like, okay, this wasn't great, but here's a whole bunch of favorite treats.
I'm glad to hear you say that, because Nigel has to get his eyes rinsed a lot. He's very sensitive to bugs and gets goopy eyes. And horses hate to having stuff squirted in their eyes. Don't blame him. So do I. But early on, what I would do is I'd squirt it in there. And even if none of it ever even went into his eyeball, just pry his eye open and squirt in that general direction. And then instantaneously shove a super yummy cookie in his face. And I swear it was maybe 3 days that I did that he got to the point where he didn't bother to move his head around because he knew there was a cookie coming any second. It works
exactly. It's like, it's like when you're a little kid and you get a shot and you get a lollipop after.
You're willing to sit still a little longer. Yeah.
Yeah. Are you ever going to love needles in your arm? No, probably not. Unless that's a thing for you.
We're not going there.
Yeah. But we can make it less unpleasant by following it with something good. So when I have to do these husbandry things, like I have to put stuff in your eye, I mean, who's going to enjoy that?
Nope.
Or I have to give you dewormer or whatever. The two ways in which I can combat it and make it more pleasant for them is, one, I've learned to get really good at administering these things with very little resistance. And I thankfully learned it through having to do it hundreds and thousands of times with many difficult horses in various states of wildness. So I got really good at, like, I can deworm anything. And they won't.
You could hire yourself out. That's a side gig right there.
I could go through a sale barn and deworm all of them.
Dang.
Not a problem. Because I had to do that hundreds of times. So getting very good at giving the dewormer or the pill in the least resistant way I can. So that's number one. And then following it with something pleasant. And then, again, even if it doesn't go very well, it's for a few moments and it's done. So yeah, you might create some undesired behaviors if it doesn't go well, but you're probably not going to be in danger of getting your horse in a state of learned helplessness from something like giving a pill.
Dun, da, da. Shoo, pressure's off. Thank goodness.
For first-time horse owners and new riders, finding the information and support you need can be challenging. That's why Equine Network has partnered with Sentinel and Absorbine to bring you My New Horse. From important horsekeeping information and how-to videos to social media communities, exclusive experiences, and more, My New Horse is your one-stop shop for riders of all levels and disciplines looking for easy-to-understand horse care information and guidance. Start your horse ownership journey today. Visit mynewhorse.com.
Well, we have time for exactly one more question. What's it going to be?
Okay. So I picked a difficult question for the last one. So we have two questions asking the same thing, but the first one is from Kara, who says, my mare, 5 years old, inconsistently bucks out on the trail. I've done lots of miles on trail, compete 25s, endurance, trained for a 50, but sidelined by an injury. We've done chiro, saddle fit, osteo, etc. I really feel like it's an excitement thing. It's always a playful buck, but I don't know how to address it. Help. And then we had another one who had a similar issue with a horse that just randomly bucks from time to time. They can't figure out why. So this is tricky without seeing what's going on. And yeah, if you have a horse that just does it out of nowhere, this is out of character for them, then doing what Kara has done is a good path. Let's look at your saddle. Let's look at osteo. Let's have the vet come out. Let's do this and that and the other. Let's check our equipment. I had a horse recently tell me he doesn't like neoprene cinches, so I changed it, and he's been better with it. So things like that. And sometimes, man, you really got to play detective. I know the other listener question, Amy, she mentions her horse is a gelding. Sometimes you might want to check do they have a bean? Does their sheath need cleaned? Because sometimes that can be very painful for a horse. And like going into the canter, it can be uncomfortable and maybe causes them to jump around. So obviously we want to look at those things. In Kara's case, where she feels like it's an excitement thing, one thing I for sure want to do if my horse has the potential to buck is I want to make sure I have a way to shut it down. So for me, that is a one rein stop. And it's kind of similar to the side passing we were talking about earlier. If I'm going along and my horse does something dangerous, they throw a buck, they bolt or something like that, I tip their nose in one direction and spiral them down until they yield their hindquarters, meaning one hind foot is stepping in front of the other hind foot and the front end is not moving very much at all. So I want to make sure I've got a way to shut it down. I don't want them to carry on and buck and buck and buck and buck and buck me off, because then the more that happens, now it's going to start becoming a habit. So that is one thing I would do to combat it. And sometimes just the knowledge that your horse has of, if I start bucking, I have to yield my hindquarters. Sometimes that alone can be enough to stop the issue. Sometimes not. The other thing I want to make sure is this a buck or is this something else? Other behaviors can really look like bucking, but aren't bucking. So examples would be like a crowhop or kicking out. And my solutions for each is going to be a little bit different. So if it is a true buck, then I want to shut it down. Like, we are stopping this. We're not doing this. So maybe that's doing a one rein stop and getting off and working on the ground. Or maybe that's doing a one rein stop, reset. Okay, let's try that canter again. And every time they start going into a buck, I shut it down every single time. So that's how I would combat it from their back if it's a buck. If it is crow hopping or kicking out, that usually comes from a different place for the horse. So horses that crow hop or kick out have difficulty with forward movement oftentimes. So for that horse, I want to work more on getting them to move out, getting them to move forward, freeing up their body and going. And with those horses, I do a lot of loose rein riding and lots of trotting and cantering and lots of transitions from trot to canter, walk to canter, canter to trot. And that can usually iron out that crow hopping or kicking out, so to speak. So these are very kind of general answers. Again, without actually seeing the issue, it can be a little hard to pinpoint exactly what's going on. But, to make it short and sweet, if it's bucking, learn how to shut it down. If it's crow hopping, kicking out, teach your horse to move forward with ease.
There you go. And you're right. There are different things to address between buck, where the front end and the back end are involved, versus crow hopping, where it's really just the back end that's losing contact with Mother Earth. Something that you might want to think about too, having had horses who are prone to the exuberant, I'm so proud of myself, crowhop, or even small buck, is teach the horse to warm up more slowly. In other words, don't just go, okay, we're walking, now we're going to start doing trot work. Add lots and lots of transitions during that warm-up phase of your ride to help the horse keep his brain in check. Because I think some horses are doing it just out of sheer exuberance. So if he's thinking, we're going to walk, we're going to trot, we're going to trot, we're going to walk, we're going to do a side pass, then we're going to trot. Even when you're an endurance horse, you can do these things. Help keep his brain in check so he doesn't just go, you know, because sometimes they'll do that, especially horses who are in the types of careers where you get going and you go in capital letters. You see that a lot. Event horses are prone to this when they're doing cross-country work. Obviously, race horses really want to do it. And jockeys hate that. So that's something you can play around with, is doing those kinds of things and trying to do them under circumstances where you might anticipate it happening. Does this horse like to do it at rides? Maybe you can find somebody to do the ride with, that the first loop you can practice a lot of transitions and help your horse stay a little bit more grounded, both with his hooves and his brain. And as far as jumping and bucking, I've had a lot of these horses. You might want to check rider influence. Different rider, does it ever happen? And this is tough because you might have to have a different rider, the same different rider, ride the horse frequently, a lot, a bunch of times, since it's a random habit. But I've had many a horse over the years that if the rider was in the wrong spot by 4 millimeters, they were going to land and try to chuck you off. And to the average onlooker, the rider looked fine. But to the really, really well-trained eye on the ground, they could see that that rider was not in the right place on the landing, or got a tiny bit left behind on the takeoff, landed on the cantle of the saddle while the horse was in the air. Teeny, 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 tiny little things can make some horses really cranky about that. And some horses will do that when they land like over a particularly big fence, or if they over jumped. Don't know why. I've never been able to find a really good reason that I said, oh, that's why they do it. But some horses, when they get a big jump and they land, they want to do it. Maybe it's the concussion. You know, they hit the ground and the saddle has to hit the ground too. So they're getting a lot of pressure on their shoulders. So that might be something else that is in play, and test that out. What you can do about it, don't know, other than learn to land and sit up so you don't get bonked in the nose. So those are some things you can do too. And perhaps a horse that wants to land and have himself a little buck or a little crowhop needs to learn to land and send themselves forward. In other words, land, and you can't buck and go forward at the same time. It's one or the other. So drop back, do lots of tiny little fences, and perhaps even tiny little fences that are not related distances, so you have the time to move forward. Jump, land, move forward. Jump, land, move forward. And that's also going to get the rider in a better position too, because when you land, you're going to have to sit up, but not land on your horse's back in order to send them forward. So that might be some things I would probably say, if that was my student out there in the arena and we saw this happening, that I might recommend.
And, that goes into kind of a theory I have, because Amy's question, her question about bucking is, she said today her horse landed a jump and then bucked me off. Again, it's not consistent, but it does, I've seen that happen where the horse comes down from the jump, and like you said, they throw in a little crow hop, or, just a little leap in the air, or they kick out. So like you were saying about getting the horse to go over jump and moving forward, if I dealt kind of with this with a Mustang makeover horse that we were doing an in-hand program with a youth kid. And one of the elements in his routine was he took the horse over a little jump. So he's leading the horse, and the horse gets the horse in the trot and takes him over a jump. And it's a little cross rail. And every time the horse finished the cross rail, he would get really exuberant, toss his head and leap in the air. So yeah. So what we did with that, and what I would do if I was on the horse's back, is I would almost do like a reining fencing program. So if you've ever seen reiners fence, they go back and forth, cantering or galloping their horses from one end of the arena to the other, and they're working on stops. And you're not trying to run your horse into the fence, but the point of the exercise is to get your horse moving out free and true and relaxed. So it's this state of, I still want my horse moving fast and reacting and being athletic and powerful and everything, but they have to do it in a way that they're listening to me. They're waiting for the cue. They're not just taking off at a dead gallop and taking matters into their own hands. It becomes like a job to them to lope or gallop these long, straight lines on a loose rein, relaxed, straight, moving forward. And so if I was working, and I'm not a jumper, I'm not a jumping trainer, so take this with a grain of salt. But if I had a horse that dealt with that, coming over a jump and then doing some sort of up and down moving, what I would do after that jump is lope as long and straight a line as I could. And I would just keep going and going until my horse relaxed before releasing and giving him a break. So they know. Yeah, they know that every time we come off that jump, we're going to go on forward. And, over time of doing that, you start to eliminate the up and down stuff in between. So that's what I would do to fix it is if they come off that jump and they're like bronking like a rodeo horse, I'm going to shut them down because I want to obviously stay on. But if it's kind of more into that jump, leaping, crow hopping, kicking out territory, if I think I can stick it safely, then we're just going to continue to lope until I feel you relax, and then I'm going to release. So after a while, the jump becomes less of, woohoo, this is so fun, to more of, this is a job, and it's just like any other job that I do. And so like with the reining horses, and teaching them to gallop at those high speeds and go into that stop, we do that calmly and repetitively until the horse is running in a way that's going to make sure he stops well. If I ask my horse to go to a stop and he's just flat out not listening, I'm not going to ask for the stop. So same with a jump. If we come off the jump and he's not listening, we're going to keep going until you realize this is just like any other maneuver. It's business like always. And the more repetitive you are with that of just lope from one end to the other, you tend to iron out all the funny business in between.
So we've plumb run out of time, but auditors, stay tuned because we have a little chat coming up for the auditors only. Where can folks find Mary Kitzmiller online if they want to appropriately stalk you, have you do a clinic, trade a horse for them, etc.?
You can find me, Mary Kitzmiller Horsemanship, on Facebook or marykitzmiller.com.
Dun, da, da. And the Horses in the Morning crew will be back again tomorrow with more fun and games. And thank you again to Equine Balanced Support, the yummy horse treat Nutri Grazers, for sponsoring today's show.